Tired of being forced to roll a Shadow Priest? Do you love the light and want to deal damage with your holy powers? Then stay with me to discuss the Divine Spec for Priests. Hello guys and welcome to Rated W for Warcraft. Let's take a look to the details that explain my thoughts for this spec. First of all, allow me to tell you that I initially thought Tenacity as a name for this build. Members of the Church of the Holy Light study and follow the three virtues of the Holy Light: respect, tenacity, and compassion. But then the great Rails, this guy rules, suggested the name Divine for a holy-based DPS spec, and I think it's way better. That's because this kind of priest would be those who have achieved the greatest level of illumination with the three virtues, not just one of them. During Legion, Blizzard revamped Discipline Priests so that they could heal their allies while dealing damage through the Atonement mechanic. However, Divine Priests would be more aggressive than Discipline, and they would wield the light as a weapon without dwelling at all in the shadows. Within the lore, we have seen many priests who use the light as a weapon. Those who belong to the Scarlet Crusade excelled at this, Torrent Priests harness the power of the sun, and let's not forget the Army of the Light. Many of its members were kinda like light mages. So it is safe to say that we have seen many priests wield the light in a really aggressive way. In terms of gameplay, Divine Priests would be ranged spellcasters, with staffs, daggers, and offhand items available for them. I want to add that I initially thought of making this a melee spec with a shield and a sword, because during vanilla WoW development, Blizzard wanted Discipline Priests to be a melee class, basically like monks. Remember Scarlet Monks in Scarlet Monastery? But then the idea of a light mage sounded way better, especially considering that we are talking about a class that wears cloth as armor. Plus, melee priests sound a lot like paladins, right? The main resource for this spec would be Virtue, which has a maximum of 30 points. Virtue is generated via the Holy Fire spell and it's consumed by various skills. Now I will give the floor to the one and only Hirumaredx to break down this build.
To make sure you never run out of virtue, Divine Priests make a heavy use of the Holy Fire spell. It initially deals radiant damage and generates 5 virtue, and then applies a dot that will generate an additional point of virtue each time it deals damage. Consume 5 virtue to call down a Fist of Glory from the heavens. With a 2-second cast and a small cooldown, it deals heavy holy damage to your target. Searing Winds is the priest's main tool for dealing area damage. It only costs 3 virtue points and has a short cast time. But even when facing multiple enemies, you must keep constant use of your holy fire. To deal damage without consuming virtue, Divine Priest can cast Divine Blast, which also has a short cast time, but this is no filler spell since it is the core ability of the Mantra's mechanic. Once the priest recites a mantra, the next 2 Divine Blast have an additional effect. At the same time, it consumes 1 virtue per second to provide a passive bonus. Mantra of Respect enhances your AoE power. Mantra of Tenacity empowers your Fist of Glory, and Mantra of Compassion increases your survivability. The Mastery, Virtuous Preaching, also synergizes with mantras, for it increases your radiant damage for 10 seconds each time you swap your mantras. As an additional passive ability, the priest has Divinity, increasing your damage for each point of current virtue. The talents for this build include Virtuous Mantras, allowing your mantras to empower one additional Divine Blast. Will of the Sun will be a great choice if you're struggling with virtue management. Every time your Holy Fire deals damage, it will generate another point of virtue. In the same row, you can also pick Scarlet Veteran, which increases your maximum virtue by 5 points. This talent is a good choice if you want to take advantage of your Divinity passive. Finally, Divine Priest can become an Embodiment of the Light, a long cooldown skill that turns into a Naru for 20 seconds. During this time, your mantras consume no virtue and your haste is increased by 20%. For too long, the priest orders have relied on the Void to defend themselves, but it's time to change that. Embrace the true power of the light, put an end to your unholy and vicious foes.
Why, thank you Hiru, that was amazing. Now, what about you guys? What do you think of this build? What are your thoughts for a light mage? I know that the 3 virtues are concepts that belong to the Church of the Holy Light only, but just as Blizzard created special forms for the Sandalary Druids, I can totally see them changing the name of the mantras to fit the other religions. Things like Mantra of Elun, Mantra of the Sun, Mantra of the Loa, Mantra of Chi-Ji, among many others. There are many factions that could unlock this spec, but my head goes directly to the Army of the Light. I am also thinking of giving priests the Holy Archer spec I talked about on an earlier video, but please tell me in the comments what would you like as an additional spec for priests. I want to give a special thanks to Hirumaredx for collaborating with me for this video. He has been really supportive of my work, generally speaking, so make sure you subscribe to his channel because his content is just awesome. And of course, a huge thanks to all my patrons that make all this possible. I will be seeing you in the next Rated W for Warcraft.